The ego that chose speed over safety. When audiences first encounter Hyoma Chigiri in Blue Lock, their initial impression is usually straightforward. He is the beautiful prodigy, the speedster, the player with long crimson hair who looks more like a model than a striker. Then his backstory is revealed. A devastating knee injury, a shattered dream, a gifted athlete afraid to run. At first glance, Chigiri appears to embody a familiar sports narrative, the talented young star who suffers a tragic injury and must learn to believe in himself again. But this interpretation barely scratches the surface. Because Chigiri's story is not fundamentally about recovery, it is not even primarily about football. At its deepest level, Hyoma Chigiri represents one of the most fascinating psychological studies in Blue Lock. His journey explores identity collapse, trauma, mortality, fear, the burden of talent, and perhaps most importantly, the terrifying question, who are you when the thing that made you special can disappear tomorrow? Many Blue Lock players fear failure. Chigiri fears irrelevance. Many Blue Lock players seek victory. Chigiri seeks proof that his life still has meaning. Many Blue Lock players gamble with defeat. Chigiri gambles with destruction. That distinction changes everything, because unlike most athletes, Chigiri's ego is not built around winning, it is built around speed, and when speed becomes threatened, his entire sense of self begins to collapse. This is why Chigiri's awakening during Team Z versus Team W is far more psychologically significant than viewers often realize. It is not simply a player rediscovering confidence, it is a man choosing death over stagnation. Not literal death, psychological death, existential death, the death that comes from abandoning the thing that gives life purpose. And once we understand that truth, Chigiri transforms from a relatively simple character into one of the most profound psychological portraits in the entire series. The curse of being chosen. To understand Chigiri, we must first understand the unique burden carried by prodigies. Most people develop confidence gradually. They work, they improve, they receive validation. Their identity expands through experience, but prodigies experience something very different. Their identities are often assigned before they are mature enough to understand them. From an early age, Chigiri was told who he was: fast, special, different, gifted, chosen. This sounds like a blessing. Psychologically, it can become a prison. Researchers studying gifted children have repeatedly observed a phenomenon known as identity foreclosure. Identity foreclosure occurs when an individual commits to a specific identity before fully exploring alternatives. Instead of discovering who they are, they inherit a role. The role becomes their entire self-concept, and this creates a dangerous vulnerability, because if the role disappears, the self disappears with it. This is exactly what happened to Chigiri. His speed was never merely a skill. It became his identity, his social value, his future, his uniqueness, his reason for existing. Every success reinforced the same message. You are special because you are fast. You matter because you are fast. You are different because you are fast. Imagine hearing that message throughout your entire childhood. Eventually, you stop believing speed is something you possess. You begin believing speed is what you are. And that subtle distinction becomes catastrophic later, because skills can be lost. Identities are harder to replace. When Chigiri's knee injury occurs, he doesn't simply lose confidence. He experiences something much deeper: identity annihilation. The psychological foundation of his existence suddenly becomes unstable. The trait that defined him, the trait that separated him, the trait that justified his future, now exists under constant threat. And this creates a profound existential crisis, because if Chigiri is no longer the fastest player on the field, who is he? The terrifying answer is that he doesn't know. The trauma of uncertainty. One of the most misunderstood aspects of sports injuries is that the physical damage often heals faster than the psychological damage. Athletes frequently recover physically while remaining psychologically trapped. This phenomenon is well documented in sports psychology. Fear of re-injury often becomes more debilitating than the injury itself. Why? Because the athlete develops a new relationship with uncertainty. Before injury, the body feels trustworthy. After injury, the body feels fragile. Before injury, movement feels natural. After injury, movement feels dangerous. Before injury, the future feels open. After injury, the future feels conditional. Chigiri embodies this perfectly. Notice that his greatest fear is not pain, it is possibility. The possibility that one sprint could destroy everything. The possibility that one movement could end his dream forever. The possibility that one decision could prove all his fears correct. This is what makes his situation psychologically suffocating, because certainty would actually be easier. If doctors told him his career was over, he could grieve and move forward. If doctors guaranteed full recovery, he could play freely. Instead, he exists in between, and human beings often struggle most with uncertainty. His knee becomes a constant psychological presence. Learned helplessness inside Blue Lock. This brings us to one of the most important psychological concepts in Chigiri's character: learned helplessness. The theory was originally developed by psychologist Martin Seligman. It describes a state where individuals become convinced that their actions cannot meaningfully improve their situation. Eventually, they stop trying, not because success is impossible, but because they believe success is impossible. This distinction matters enormously, because Chigiri still possesses incredible speed, he still possesses extraordinary talent, he still possesses world-class potential. Objectively, he has not lost everything. Subjectively, he feels as though he has. And subjective reality often determines behavior more than objective reality. This is why Chigiri's early Blue Lock performance appears strangely passive. Many viewers interpret it as cowardice. It is more accurately psychological paralysis. His mind has become trapped between two unbearable outcomes. Option 1, run, risk re-injury, potentially lose everything. Option 2, never run, never discover whether he could have succeeded, potentially regret it forever. Neither option feels acceptable, so he chooses a third path. Stagnation. He exists, he participates, but he does not truly compete, because genuine competition would force a decision, and Chigiri is desperately avoiding decisions. What makes this even more fascinating is that Blue Lock itself functions as an enormous psychological pressure chamber. Every day inside the facility increases the tension, every match forces confrontation, every challenge threatens exposure. Eventually, the psychological deadlock becomes unsustainable. Something must break, either Chigiri's dream or Chigiri's fear, and that moment arrives during Team Z versus Team W. The secret reason he entered Blue Lock. Why did he join Blue Lock at all? This question seems simple, but the answer reveals everything. If Chigiri truly wanted to become the world's greatest striker, why wasn't he fully committed? If he was too afraid to run, why enter the most ruthless football environment imaginable? The answer is psychologically brilliant. Chigiri did not enter Blue Lock because he wanted to win. He entered because he wanted permission to lose. This sounds contradictory, but it aligns perfectly with the psychology of sunk cost. The sunk cost fallacy occurs when individuals continue investing in something because of previous investment rather than future value. Chigiri spent his entire life pursuing football, years of effort, years of dreams, years of sacrifice. Walking away voluntarily would feel unbearable. It would mean admitting defeat. It would mean accepting that all those years led nowhere. His mind cannot tolerate that conclusion, so instead he unconsciously searches for an external force to make the decision for him. Blue Lock becomes that force, a place so brutal, so competitive, so merciless, that failure would feel justified. If Blue Lock crushes him, he doesn't have to quit. Football quit him. The distinction protects his ego. Psychologically, this is an escape strategy. He wants the environment to make the choice he cannot make himself. In a sense, Chigiri enters Blue Lock hoping for liberation through defeat, but Blue Lock refuses to give him that escape. Instead, it forces him to confront the truth. The problem was never his knee. The problem was fear, and fear can only be defeated through action. The moment fear lost its absolute power, the match that forced a decision. Every major psychological transformation has a point of no return, a moment where the individual can no longer maintain the illusion that protected them. For some people, it is a failure. For others, it is a loss. For Hyoma Chigiri, it is a sprint. When Team Z faces Team W, Chigiri enters the match carrying the same psychological burden he has carried since his injury. He is still trapped, still hesitant, still protecting himself, still living in a self-imposed prison. The crucial thing to understand is that Chigiri has become comfortable with suffering. This sounds strange at first. Why would anyone become comfortable with suffering? Because familiar pain often feels safer than uncertain risk. Human beings possess a remarkable ability to adapt to misery. If that misery becomes predictable, the brain begins treating it as normal. This is one of the reasons people remain in unhealthy jobs. Why Isagi changes everything. Yoichi Isagi does not heal Chigiri. He does not inspire him through friendship. He does not magically restore his confidence. What Isagi actually does is much more significant. He destroys Chigiri's excuses. This is a recurring pattern throughout Blue Lock. The facility constantly strips players of the narratives they use to protect themselves. Excuses become impossible. Comfort becomes impossible. Self-deception becomes impossible. Chigiri has spent months telling himself a story. The story goes something like this. I can't run because my injury might return. On the surface, this sounds rational, but beneath the surface lies a hidden assumption. The hidden assumption is that avoiding risk protects him from loss. Isagi unintentionally exposes the flaw in that belief, because Chigiri has already lost. His dream is already disappearing. His identity is already fading. His future is already shrinking. The catastrophe he fears is happening in slow motion. This realization changes everything. Psychologically speaking, Chigiri begins experiencing cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance occurs when two beliefs become impossible to reconcile. Chigiri believes, I am protecting my future, but reality shows, I am destroying my future. Both cannot be true simultaneously. Eventually, one belief must die, and when it dies, Chigiri experiences something extraordinary. Not confidence, not courage, clarity. The existential revelation. One of the greatest misconceptions about courage is that courageous people stop being afraid. In reality, courage emerges when something becomes more important than fear. Fear remains. It simply loses priority. This distinction is crucial because Chigiri never truly eliminates his fear. Even after his awakening, the risk remains real. His knee could fail, his career could end, his worst nightmare could come true. The danger never disappears. What changes is his relationship with danger. And this is where Chigiri enters the realm of existential psychology. Existential psychology focuses on how individuals respond to uncertainty, mortality, and meaning. According to thinkers like Viktor Frankl and Rollo May, psychological suffering often emerges when people lose connection to purpose. Purpose gives suffering meaning. Without purpose, suffering becomes unbearable. This describes Chigiri perfectly. Before his awakening, he suffers without meaning. His injury feels pointless. His fear feels pointless. His stagnation feels pointless. Everything becomes empty. Then something changes. He reaches a devastating realization. One day his football career will end regardless. Maybe through injury, maybe through age, maybe through circumstances. No athlete runs forever. No dream lasts forever. No body remains invincible forever. For most people, this realization is terrifying. For Chigiri, it becomes liberating, because if loss is inevitable anyway, then avoiding life accomplishes nothing. The future was never guaranteed. It never was. The illusion of safety was always an illusion, and once he understands this, fear begins losing its dominance. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like and subscribe.